What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Taste Like Music. Jason and Joe here. It is another album of the week. If you're not familiar, this is the series where we review records submitted to us by our patrons. We keep track of everyone's ratings in our Patreon community. So the only stipulation for this is that it can only have been rated by 8 or fewer people. So you can't pick anything too obvious. Today we are reviewing the record We Like It Here by Snarky Puppy. Records from 2014. It is the ninth Snarky Puppy record. I guess it's considered a studio album. It's all new material, but it is recorded live. It was recorded over 4 nights in the Netherlands. Snarky Puppy is a jazz fusion group led by the bassist Michael League. This album has players like Larnell Lewis on it, Corey Henry, Mark Letary. Those are the names I recognized, but a bunch of other notable players that have their own Wikipedia pages as well. Most of those players that I'm familiar with, I know from music YouTube, not really from listening to their other work. So they are well known in the music sphere. Yeah, that's all I really know about it. We haven't listened to much fusion for the channel. I can't say I'm a huge fan of it personally, but yeah.
Yeah, I've never heard of these guys. Jazz fusion's not really my thing, though I did get like 8 Weather Report albums from my dad when he gave me his vinyl collection. So he was a big fan. He loved jazz fusion. So I'm sure I've heard plenty of it growing up, but not something I delve into too much. Obviously, I love Jaco Pastorius because he's a great bass player. He used to play the bass. So other than that, not a lot of familiarity with the genre, so bear with us, I guess.
Yeah, so we recently started breaking our reviews into different compartments and sections, and we typically have been starting with songwriting. But this isn't really the type of songwriting that we normally talk about. However, Michael League, the band leader, has described Snarky Puppy as a pop group that improvises a lot without vocals. So even though it is jazz fusion, I do think there is some consideration for like structure and form and some type of melodic hook usually being somewhere that they're not just kind of jumping in and totally improvising. It's usually built around some sort of form. Is it good songwriting? I don't know. I can't say that much of it like hit me as being memorable.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's most jazz fusion isn't going to necessarily be catchy or memorable. So the songwriting itself is sort of a different thing than you'd get with like a pop group or a rock group of songwriting. These songs, I mean, I guess there was a lot of improvisation involved. It was all live. But I do think, there's some form here because a lot of the songs seem like they have a straightforward path once they get started. Like things come in and out, and someone gets a solo here and somebody gets a spotlight there. But there's not like these big like musical changes of direction where it like veers off into something completely different. It seems kind of straightforward as much as it can be for like jazz fusion. Um, and there are songs here, and I think, for jazz fusion, it's pretty catchy. It's not like pop music catchy, but I kind of get what Michael League was saying, where it's reasonably catchy. I think there's consideration for, like you said, like melody and at least trying to make things memorable as far as like the solos go. I think in general, jazz fusion is very like vibey and groovy. And yeah, a lot of these are like vibe songs where it's like you get going and you kind of get the same thing, and then you'll get some cool soloing and maybe a drum solo here, or things change a little bit. You get some sax parts, but I think in general, like they have a path that they stick with for these songs, and it's laid out beforehand, so it's not just all over the place. It seems like there is a form and function to these songs.
Next up, musicianship. I think on a technical level, it's like 10 out of 10. These are all insane players. The fact that it's live, I think, makes it even more impressive. Granted, it's over 4 nights, so it's not like one take and done. They had multiple shots at it, but still, still quite impressive. Some of the guitar work reminds me a little of like 90s Steve Vai stuff. Whatever modes they're playing in are similar to the ones that Steve Vai likes to use. Yeah, I just, for me, I was not a huge fan of this. I can say that now. I'm not sure how you could be so good at playing and be less interesting to me. None of this playing hit me on an emotional level whatsoever. It doesn't move me in any way. And I think some of that could at least be partially due to the production, which we will also talk about. But yeah, I didn't think the playing had a lot of like personality or character to it. It also, I mean, it wasn't like speedy and flashy just for the sake of being speedy and flashy and that kind of thing, which would be like a maybe a criticism you might hear from someone talking about this type of music or a different band in this genre. I didn't think that. I thought it was all tasteful playing. I just didn't think it was, there didn't seem to be a ton of feeling in it, at least not that I was sensing.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to suss out whether or not it has feeling. I mean, obviously the instrumental prowess is ridiculous. It almost for a album like this, they almost make it sound too easy sometimes, and I think it's like, you don't understand how difficult all of this is and how much practice and, you know, the arrangement and the way that they have, telekinesis and can kind of go off of each other and it almost becomes, I don't know, there's so much good playing that it becomes less impressive listening to it because it's all so good. And there aren't enough moments where it's like not the focus, whatever, What About Me has some great psychedelic guitar stuff. And then Sleeper, there's this Moog talk box that Sean Martin's doing. It's really cool. Jambone has some cool spider-like guitar, a lot of speedy runs and licks. Kite is kind of a slow, deliberate ballad. Outlier, you get like the horns and the rhythm section showing out. Tio Macaca or whatever has some nice Latin rhythms. Lingus has some cool keyboard playing. All of this stuff is so impressive, and everybody gets the chance to show off, but there's just not enough like downtime where they're doing something else other than showing off. And it kind of starts to blur together, and you kind of get numb to the greatness of the playing because it all kind of has the same vibe to it. There's a couple songs that don't, but I don't know. There's not enough, I think, like you said, really memorable solos or moments. It's all just sort of like, yeah, okay, that's really impressive playing. I'm not going to remember anything about it. It sounds really impressive, but yeah, it doesn't stick in your memory. And despite the fact that they do vary things up, like these are like 6 minute to 8 minute to 10 minute songs. And it all just kind of blurs together at some point and becomes less than the sum of its parts, I think, because it is all such, the drumming is amazing throughout and the bass playing is incredible. And yet you're like sort of numb to it by the end. Like I wish it was more impressive to me listening to it than it is, I'm sure, like on paper, if you looked at, the charts, the horn charts and the bass tabs and the drum parts. I'm sure it's just ridiculous. But like you just kind of lose that when you're listening to it because there's not enough of that like emptiness or quietness or something other than just prodigious playing all the time. And I guess that's the problem with jazz fusion to me in general. I look at ratings and reviews on like Rate Your Music and stuff, and obviously it's jazz, so they love it, but just the the superlatives for this type of music Like I get it, but I just don't. I'm never gonna get it, and I'm sorry. I can't do it.
All right, yeah, I think we feel similarly there. Production on this, to me, it's very similar to the musicianship. It's almost too good. It's such a clean and like well manicured sound. And I think with this type of playing, like such prodigious playing, it needs to have some sort of like edge to it sonically. And this is just like way too everything in its right place. The playing is so perfect and the sound is so perfect that I think you end up with like, I don't know, that not much excitement. So yeah, it's an impressive feat. Just like the playing itself is impressive. To record something like this live and have it sound this good, it's I mean, you can't say it's bad production really, but the way the production I guess enhances or doesn't enhance the playing, it just doesn't really, it's not a good marriage. It's like too much of the same thing. They're both like too clean. One of them has to push the boundary a little and shake things up, and it's just too tidy.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was live at first. I thought like the applause between songs was just like canned, sort of like, how Benny and the Jets type of live recording. Because yeah, it's so clean and so good that you can't really like what's the point of I guess the point of recording it live is to show off how good they are at playing, but I don't know if that like enhances anything other than like in the back of your mind thinking, wow, this is so good and I can't believe it's live. Yeah, I don't know what else, I guess it's cheaper to record live, and if you're that good, then who needs a studio? But yeah, I just don't know how it improves the songs themselves just to record it live.
Best and worst track. It's a hard call for me because most of these sit pretty much at the same like rating for me. I don't feel very differently about any of these tracks. So I guess I would go Jambone as my favorite. I think it had the most standout guitar work of anything on the record. So maybe I'd call that the best. Kite, probably the worst. And not that it's bad or like much worse than anything else. It's just kind of slower and a little sleepy and sluggish for a record that I was already kind of like getting a little bored with. So I'd call that the weakest for me.
I think Jambone, probably my favorite. Jambone or Outlier, I think were the standouts. Least favorite, probably Tio Macaco. Just that kind of, I don't know, rote Latin rhythm sounding, sort of vaguely Latin sounding instrumentation. Just doesn't do a lot for me.
All right, so our scores for this for me, not something I don't think I'd ever come back to this record. Um, wasn't too excited by any of it, but I also don't think any of it is bad. So it is a dead center 2.5 for me.
I'm gonna go 3.5, which is below the really like 4-star minimum for me. But I think it's good enough that, at no point was I like, this is terrible, like turn it off. I enjoyed the listening experience. I think it was a good experience. Good to hear stuff like this outside my comfort zone. And I like a good, instrumental show off fest. But not something I really am going to listen to often or ever again. But I might hear another Snarky Puppy album just to see what they, did. If there's any vocals, how it sounds not live, stuff like that. But yeah, I can't go higher than 3.5. Light 3.5.
All right. Well, let us know if you know this record, what you think of it, or give it a listen and then drop us a comment. Hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and check out our Patreon. It's linked in the video description. We have merch there as well. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.